What if I told you that the reality you see now is nothing more than a reflection of the way you breathe? Your first reaction might be one of surprise, perhaps even laughter, but think for a moment, what if it were true? Nikola Tesla, one of humanity's greatest geniuses, would never have considered this hypothesis absurd. On the contrary, for him, the universe was not a collection of solid objects, but an invisible symphony of vibrations, frequencies, and silent pulses. And within this symphony, your breathing is the note that determines how life resonates within you. This is the point where science, spirituality, and human experience meet, but it is also the point most people ignore every day. When you breathe unconsciously, shallowly, and hurriedly, your body adapts to the rhythm of haste, fear, and mental noise. It's like tuning a radio to a weak station and hearing only hiss. Tesla believed that we humans are living antennas. And like any antenna, we pick up what we're tuned to. If we breathe automatically, unconsciously, we only pick up interference. But when we breathe deeply and presently, something extraordinary happens. The body, mind, and spirit begin to tune into the invisible field of creation itself. Have you ever wondered why your breath catches in moments of fear? Why does the air freeze in your chest during a deep fright? Or why, when you're in love, your breathing seems light, almost dancing? Tesla would say it's not just about biology, but about vibration. The way you breathe is how you translate and return to the universe what you feel and think. Breathing is the secret language between your soul and the cosmos. And if you've never realized this, perhaps it's because you've always breathed on autopilot, never experiencing the power to transform each inhalation into a cosmic code and each exhalation into a message sent back to the universal field. Imagine that every molecule of air entering your lungs carries a cosmic fingerprint, a kind of vibrational signature that connects you to the whole. It's not just oxygen, it's information, it's frequency, it's life pulsating at the most subtle level. And when you exhale, you don't just release carbon dioxide, you send signals, vibrations that spread like waves, affecting not only you but also the space around you. Tesla understood that nothing is isolated. Every thought, every emotion, every act of breathing produces a wave, and this wave finds an echo in the universe. What we call bad luck, blockage, or stagnation may not be the result of external forces. What if it were simply a reflection of noisy breathing, an unconscious pattern of fear and inattention? What if every moment of anxiety was not only psychological, but also energetic, fueled by the air you hold or release without realizing it? Tesla believed that the difference between capturing pure energy and living in noise lay precisely in the quality of attunement. And breathing, as simple as it may seem, is the first adjustment of that attunement. He used to say that the greatest discoveries are born of the invisible. Electric light, radio waves, wireless transmission, all of these existed before they were discovered. What changed was that someone, in a state of receptiveness, captured what others ignored. Now imagine if the same applies to your own life. How many answers, how many solutions, and how many paths are you unable to see, simply because your breathing keeps you stuck in a jamming station? Tesla believed that inner silence was the key to capturing these hidden frequencies. And this silence begins with something so simple yet so overlooked: the way you breathe. Think about how we live today. Accelerated, distracted, overwhelmed by stimuli. Our breaths become shallow, almost invisible. But this pattern has consequences. The body interprets this way of breathing as a constant state of alert, as if danger were always lurking. This alters your hormones, your mood, your choices. You react instead of acting, respond instead of creating. It's like constantly living in the echo chamber of the noise, never hearing the original melody. Tesla, if he were standing next to you, would say, "You are not the noise, you are the frequency. Just adjust your receiver." And here a micro-conflict arises. If breathing is so powerful, why weren't we taught from an early age to use it consciously? Perhaps because a human being who masters their own vibration is not easily controlled. They are not predictable. They don't allow themselves to be trapped in patterns of fear or consumption. They become free. And freedom, at this level, has always been the greatest challenge for any system that seeks to keep humans distracted and disconnected from themselves. It's curious to think that Tesla, a man considered eccentric, isolated, and even ridiculed in his time, already understood this truth. He believed that the human body is the most sophisticated of machines, but also the most perfect of receivers. For him, our skin, our nerves, our respiratory system, and our heart are antennas that, if aligned, can capture the highest frequencies of existence. And in this context, breathing ceases to be an automatic act and becomes a vibrational key. Have you ever noticed how a simple sigh can instantly change your perception? When tired, exhaling deeply relaxes the body. When nervous, inhaling calmly reorganizes the mind. These are tiny gestures that alter entire states. Tesla saw this as an invisible field of engineering, the vibrational design of human life. Just as a machine needs a steady current to function, we need a conscious respiratory flow to access our best selves. And yet, here lies another tension. Even knowing that something so simple can transform us, almost no one practices it. Why? Perhaps because simplicity doesn't sell, or because deep down, we're afraid of what we'll find in the silence of conscious breathing. Because when the noise disappears, truths we avoid seeing emerge. Old pains, denied choices, the meaninglessness of certain paths. But Tesla wasn't afraid of silence. For him, silence was the laboratory of the greatest inventions. It is there that breathing finds its true power. Now imagine, what if the next breath you take isn't just oxygen, but an opportunity to reconfigure the entire field around you? What if every inhalation is a secret password to access a cosmic memory, and every exhalation is a command sent to the universe? If this is true, and Tesla believed it was, then you are not just a spectator of life, but an active co-creator. The question is, how have you been breathing? As a receiver blocked by noise, or as an open antenna to the invisible melody that sustains the cosmos? This isn't naive mysticism. Modern science already proves that breathing patterns alter brainwaves, regulate emotions, and even transform body chemistry. Tesla didn't have access to MRIs or neuroscience labs, but he intuited this truth. The invisible governs the visible, and breathing is the most immediate portal to the invisible. You might wonder, why should I, amid so many challenges, give importance to something as simple as breathing? Because it is precisely in simplicity that power lies hidden. Tesla said that the greatest forces in the universe lie in the most discrete things: light, sound, air. What we do with them is what changes everything. And here's the provocation. What if the key to changing your reality isn't in big decisions, but in something you already do thousands of times a day without even realizing it? What if the first step isn't to look outside, but to adjust within, starting with the air that enters and leaves your body right now? This reflection leads us to a fascinating frontier. If conscious breathing can alter a person's emotional and vibrational state, imagine what happens when millions breathe unconsciously. The world we live in may be, in part, a reflection of shallow, accelerated, disconnected collective breathing. But the opposite is also possible. A different world can emerge when individuals, one by one, begin to breathe in harmony with the higher frequency. And here I leave you not with an answer, but with an open question. If your breath is the bridge between you and the universe, what will you do with your next breath? Will you let it pass unnoticed, like just another noise in the chaos? Or will you transform it into a conscious signal, a silent call that connects you to the field where everything begins? Perhaps it is precisely at this moment that you understand why Tesla believed that the future of humanity lies not in external machines, but in the awakening of the internal machine, you. Here by ChatGPT. Imagine yourself in a room of absolute silence. There are no voices, no music, not even the sound of footsteps, only the light, almost imperceptible breathing that insists on reminding you that you are still alive. This kind of silence can be unsettling. It may seem strange, but it was precisely in this silence that Nikola Tesla found the greatest revelations of his life. He said that only when the visible becomes still does the invisible begin to speak. While others sought answers in books, debates, and already known formulas, Tesla immersed himself in hours of seclusion, sitting, walking alone, or simply observing. For many, it was eccentricity. For him, it was the secret laboratory where the secrets of the universe were revealed. Silence wasn't emptiness for Tesla, but a different frequency, a fertile space where the mind became a receiver rather than a transmitter. He didn't try to force ideas. He didn't search anxiously. He surrendered himself to a state of receptivity so intense that his discoveries emerged complete, as if someone had just handed him a finished blueprint. His machines, his coils, his wireless transmission inventions often began this way, first as a crystalline design emerging in his mind, then as something the physical world merely confirmed. This sounds mystical, but it wasn't mysticism for Tesla. He called it engineering the invisible, and it all began when external reality became calm enough for the internal waves to align. Now think of something closer to your everyday life. Imagine a young mother, exhausted after a full day of work and worries. She steps onto the crowded subway, receives an unexpected call, and discovers that her young daughter has been rushed to the hospital. Within seconds, her world collapses. Her body reacts. Rapid, shallow, almost suffocating breathing. Shoulders tense, heart racing, blurred vision. She feels like she's going to faint but instinctively closes her eyes and decides to take a deep breath. 1, 2, 3, and again. The fear doesn't disappear, but it lessens. Clarity begins to return. Her mind, which once seemed like a whirlwind, now finds some focus. Upon arriving at the hospital, even though she's still worried, she can hear the doctors better, can make clearer decisions, can hold the moment instead of being swallowed up by it. What has changed? Nothing in the external environment. Only the signal she sends to herself and the world has changed. Tesla would call this field adjustment. He believed that each emotion generates a specific vibration and that the environment responds to it like a mirror. The woman, by taking a deep breath, not only calmed her body, but also adjusted the frequency she emitted. Instead of sending out waves of chaos, she began sending out waves of focus. This small gesture creates a huge difference in the way reality around her is organized. It seems too simple to be true, but it's precisely this simplicity that most people overlook. And perhaps you've experienced something similar. A moment when you were about to lose control, but you managed to take a deep breath, and suddenly the situation seemed less threatening. Perhaps in an argument, perhaps facing a professional challenge, perhaps in a moment of unexpected sadness. What Tesla reminds us is that this resource is always available, but we choose whether or not to use it. The silence he cultivated was precisely the space where breathing could reorganize internal chaos and open space for new insights. Now imagine the opposite scenario. Someone who never allows themselves this pause. They're constantly running, talking, reacting to everything without stopping. Silence frightens them because in it they'd have to face their true feelings. This person constantly lives in a state of shallow breathing, of latent anxiety. The body is always on alert, as if there were constant danger. The mind never finds rest. And then come the consequences: hasty decisions, relationships that fray, health that weakens. Tesla would say this person lives in a short circuit. The antenna is on, but picks up only noise, and no device works well when tuned to an interference station. What differentiates these two scenarios is not luck or willpower, but the ability to hear what silence reveals. Tesla asserted that the human mind is capable of capturing invisible information, but only if it is in a state of harmony. Mental noise prevents us from hearing, and silence doesn't come alone. It needs to be cultivated. This doesn't mean escaping the world or abandoning responsibilities. It means creating moments when breathing becomes conscious, when the body realigns, when the mind stops fighting and begins to listen. Have you ever wondered why, in moments of genuine inspiration, time seems to slow down? Why do the best ideas often come to you in the shower, on a walk, or in a moment of calm? Because in these moments, even without realizing it, you connect with the same silence that Tesla intentionally sought. Your breathing deepens, your body relaxes, your brain enters a different rhythm, and in this state, solutions appear almost by themselves. It's not magic, it's attunement. But here an inevitable question arises. If this silence is so powerful, why have we strayed so far from it? Perhaps because the modern world has trained us to believe that value always lies in noise, in constant production, in speed. Pausing seems like a waste of time, when in fact it is precisely the pause that gives us access to what truly matters. Tesla knew this. While his contemporaries competed in crowded laboratories, he searched alone in parks, in the wee hours of the morning, in his silent notebooks. And there, in the space between one breath and the next, answers emerged that still shape the world today. The question remains, how can we apply this to our daily lives? You don't need to be an eccentric genius to try it. You just need the courage to face silence without fear. Try, for example, before responding to provocation, closing your eyes and taking a deep breath. Try taking 3 conscious breaths before making an important decision. Try, when you feel lost, simply stopping and listening to the sound of your own inhale. The result may not be immediate. You may still feel fear, anger, or doubt. But notice, these states begin to lose strength. Chaos doesn't disappear from the world, but it begins to dissolve within you. This is the true power of silence. It doesn't eliminate external problems, but it transforms the way you receive them. And by changing your reception, you change your response. Tesla insisted that reality is reactive. It responds to the vibration you emit. Conscious silence is the most powerful way to adjust this emission, but there's a detail many overlook. Silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's presence. The presence of something greater, the presence of a realm that speaks another language. When you silence the noise of the world, you begin to hear this other voice. It's not a voice made of words, but of sensations, intuitions, perceptions. And often this voice reveals paths that logical reason would never reveal. You might wonder, does this really work? Or is it just a poetic illusion? Think again about the young mother on the subway. If she hadn't taken those deep breaths, she might have fainted, might have arrived at the hospital unable to cope. But one small gesture changed everything. This is the kind of transformation that doesn't depend on belief, but on practice. You don't have to wait for chaos to experience it. Silence can be cultivated now, in the midst of routine, in the small pauses of the day. And here comes the suspense. If conscious breathing in silence can change the way we face personal crises, what would happen if it were used consistently as a daily practice? What would happen if we learned to transform not just moments of fear, but the entire structure of our lives through this invisible adjustment? Tesla believed this would open doors to a new humanity, a humanity capable of capturing the invisible not just in inventions, but in all aspects of life. Perhaps silence is the missing link in our evolution. Not a passive silence, but an active silence, where the breath guides and the mind becomes a receptive field. It is in this space that human beings cease to be merely reactive and begin to be creative in essence. Tesla experienced this daily, and his discoveries were merely a reflection of what was already happening within him. What the universe showed him was proportional to the silence he cultivated. And the question that remains for you is simple yet powerful. When was the last time you truly allowed yourself silence? When was the last time you didn't run away from yourself, but breathed calmly, waiting to see what might emerge? Maybe you realize it's been years, maybe you've never even tried. But if you're here hearing these words, it's because part of you already knows you need this return. Silence is not absence, it is beginning. It is in silence that the next phase opens. And this is precisely where Tesla leads us, not as a distant myth, but as a reminder that the greatest of technologies has always been within us. The question is, are you willing to listen? What if I told you that the most powerful sound in existence isn't the one you hear with your ears, but the one that vibrates within you in complete silence? Nikola Tesla believed this unwaveringly. He saw reality as a grand cosmic symphony in which every atom, every planet, and even every human emotion resonated at its own frequency. For him, the strongest sounds weren't made of noise, but of invisible vibrations, capable of sustaining the order of the universe. What we call silence isn't the absence of sound, but the presence of a music that our ordinary hearing hasn't yet learned to capture. This is the paradox. While you think nothing is happening, the entire universe vibrates in perfect harmony. But how can we access this invisible sound? Ancient tradition already knew the way. Masters from India described the practice of Brahmari, the bee buzz, as a method to internally resonate the vibration that awakens higher states of consciousness. When you take a deep breath and exhale, emitting a soft, continuous sound, similar to the buzzing of a bee, you're not just creating a feeling of relaxation. You're activating a vibrational field that runs through your rib cage, your bones, your skull, and ultimately your mind. The sound vibrates within you like a lighthouse tuning internal frequencies. Tesla, even without using the language of yogis, understood that the human body could be used as an oscillator, a transmitter, and a receiver all at once. For him, this vibration was not a metaphor, but a physical reality. Have you ever stopped to think about what happens when a crystal glass is exposed to a specific sound? If the frequency is adjusted, the glass vibrates, and in some cases, even shatters. If this happens to inanimate objects, what would happen to the human body, which is made of living tissue, conductive fluids, and subtle electrical fields? Isn't it strange that we've never been taught to consciously tap into this power? Perhaps because, by discovering how to vibrate internally, you become independent of external stimuli. You begin to access states that the modern world tries to sell in the form of distractions, drugs, or illusions. Tesla observed that everything in the universe possessed a sonic signature. Stars emitted waves, particles vibrated, even empty space reverberated at a background frequency. Today, modern science calls this cosmic radiation, but Tesla had already intuited this reality long before. He believed that by understanding the nature of invisible sound, we could not only cure diseases, but also reprogram human destiny. Sound would be not just an effect, but a cause. It could rearrange structures, adjust fields, transform realities. Now pause and ask yourself, what is the sound that exists within you when everything around you falls silent? Is it an anxious noise, a ragged breath, or is it a deeper, almost intangible echo that seems to come from a place you can't name? If you've never taken the time to listen to this sound, perhaps you're living only on the surface of your own existence. What if this echo holds the key to accessing forgotten memories, clearer intuitions, and even answers to questions you don't even dare ask? When you practice inner humming, your body begins to react in surprising ways. Your heart slows, your mind quiets, intense emotions lose their hold on you. But there's something deeper, sensations of warmth, sudden chills, an unexpected clarity that emerges as if from an insight. You might call it spiritual, you might call it energetic, you might call it neurological. Tesla would call it attunement. For him, the difference between a confused man and an enlightened man was the quality of the frequency at which he vibrated. What if I told you that this sound isn't just a wellness technique, but a veritable activation code? Every time you consciously vibrate within yourself, you send a pattern to the universal field, and that field responds. Think of it like ripples in water. Each vibration you create expands in ever-widening circles, reaching places you can't see. Isn't it the same with your emotions? When you're angry, that state affects those around you. When you're at peace, the same happens. Now imagine what happens when this vibration is intentionally cultivated, when you consciously decide what you want to emit. Tesla spoke of his inventions as extensions of this principle. For him, there was no difference between a high-frequency coil transmitting wireless energy and a human being internally resonating a sound that reorganizes their field. Both follow the same law, the law of resonance. The universe responds not to what you superficially desire, but to what you vibrate in essence. And this essence can be adjusted by the way you breathe and the sound you emit. How many times have you felt paralyzed by repetitive thoughts, as if your mind were stuck in a dead-end cycle? What if this imprisonment wasn't just psychological but vibrational? The mind isn't just thoughts, it's also rhythm, it's also waves. And waves can be altered. Inner sound is the most direct tool for breaking these cycles. When you vibrate consciously, the mind can't sustain the same patterns of noise. It needs to reorganize itself around the new frequency. Here comes a pattern breaker. What if everything you call personality isn't fixed, but merely the result of the invisible sound pattern you maintain daily? Tesla believed that the human mind is not a closed container, but an open field in constant exchange with the environment. If you change the vibration, you change the field. If you change the field, you change who you are. This can be frightening, but also liberating. A practical example. Imagine you arrive home after an exhausting day. Your body is tense, your mind is full, your heart is racing. You sit down, close your eyes, and for a few minutes, vibrate to the soft, continuous sound of your inner hum. You don't force anything, just let the sound flow. Gradually, your body loosens, your mind clears, and the feeling of heaviness diminishes. The external world hasn't changed, but your relationship with it is no longer the same. You are more present, calmer, more lucid. Isn't this what we call transformation? Isn't this the kind of power we believe doesn't exist within us? Tesla claimed that humanity would change completely the day it understood the true nature of vibration. Medicine would be different, science would be different, spirituality would be different. Today we know that specific sound frequencies can regenerate cells, rearrange water molecules, and influence the mind. But what would happen if we learned to use our own bodies as instruments, without relying on external machines? What if the great invention wasn't external, but already embedded in our nervous system, waiting to be activated? You might be surprised to realize that what we call intuition can actually be a direct result of this internal vibration. Those moments when you just know something, without being able to explain it, are flashes of attunement to the invisible frequency that Tesla believed underpinned the order of the cosmos. What if intuition weren't chance, but a state accessible and trainable through conscious vibration? What would happen to your choices, your relationships, your worldview, if you began to trust this state instead of ignoring it? The invisible sound doesn't need proof to reveal itself. It manifests itself in direct experiences, in subtle changes that, when accumulated, transform lives. The problem is that most people don't take the time to experience it. There's always more haste, more noise, more distraction. Tesla, on the other hand, cultivated his silence and his vibrations with discipline. He understood that the universe doesn't shout, it whispers, and only those who know how to listen capture the message. What if you started right now? Close your eyes for a moment, take a deep breath, and as you exhale, allow a soft, vibrant sound to course through your body. Don't worry about perfection. Just feel. Notice what changes. Maybe nothing immediately, maybe everything. But the simple act is already a gesture of attunement. It's like knocking on the door of a forgotten place inside you, waiting for someone to finally decide to enter. Tesla saw humanity as a child playing with pieces of wood, unaware of the entire forest surrounding us. We are so occupied with the superficial that we forget the essential. Invisible sound is part of this essential. It is the hidden language that sustains the cosmos and can transform your life from the inside out. The question is, will you have the courage to listen? And here's the final provocation of this section. If until now you believed that silence was absence and sound was just noise, how does your perspective change when you understand that the most powerful sound is precisely the one that arises in silence? Perhaps this is the key Tesla was trying to give us. Perhaps the universe isn't asking you to speak louder, but to learn to vibrate differently. What if there were a latent force within you, an invisible current waiting only for the right moment to awaken? Nikola Tesla believed that the human body is not just a biological organism, but a sophisticated energetic structure, a living antenna capable of conducting currents far more intense than those that illuminate cities. He compared the spine to a transmission tower, a kind of conducting pillar that connects the foundations of life to the heights of consciousness. And deep within this pillar, according to ancient traditions and Tesla's intuition, lies a dormant energy, known by different cultures by different names, but always with the same essence. A power that, upon awakening, transforms not only the body, but also the mind and soul. Imagine the following scene. A vast river dammed by a dam. The water accumulates, presses, and churns behind the walls. For years, this river remains contained, its force controlled. But at some point, the floodgates open, and the water surges with such intensity that nothing can stop it. This is the closest metaphor to what happens when inner energy awakens without preparation. The body trembles. The mind becomes frightened. Old emotions emerge violently. It's a real process documented in accounts by monks, yogis, and even ordinary people who, in moments of crisis, have felt this current rise up their spines like liquid fire. Recent studies are beginning to shed light on this phenomenon. Research conducted at Yale University, for example, analyzed the brains of advanced meditation and yoga practitioners. During deep states, gamma-frequency brainwaves, associated with insights, clarity, and peak states, increase significantly. These patterns are not common in normal waking states. They appear in experiences that many describe as mystical or transcendent. Tesla believed that this type of activity was a sign that the body was finally capturing higher frequencies from the universal field. To him, there was nothing supernatural about it. It was pure physics. When the current rises, the entire system enters resonance. But why does this energy remain dormant? Modern society has conditioned us to live disconnected from our bodies. We spend most of our time in our minds, trapped in worries, to-do lists, screens, and distractions. Energy, instead of flowing naturally, stagnates. Egyptian spiritual traditions called it the divine breath. Chinese Taoists spoke of ascending qi. European alchemists described the secret fire. All pointed to the same reality. There is a reserve of strength within human beings that remains forgotten because we have been taught to ignore it. Have you ever felt a sudden chill for no reason? Or an intense heat rising through your body in moments of deep emotion? Ever felt the sensation of an electric current running down your spine, as if something were trying to awaken within you? These signs can be subtle manifestations of this latent energy. The problem is that instead of embracing them, most people repress them, ignore them, or interpret them as something wrong. Conventional medicine, failing to understand this phenomenon, often classifies it as a disorder or imbalance. Tesla, on the other hand, believed that these manifestations are evidence that the human body is capable of handling intensities that have not yet been mapped. A curious fact, in some Tibetan traditions, monks train for decades to consciously activate this energy. When they succeed, they report not only visions or states of ecstasy, but also verifiable physical effects. There are records of monks capable of raising their body temperature to the point of drying wet towels placed over them in freezing environments. Western scientists were intrigued to witness this. How can one explain that with the power of mind and breath alone, one can change one's physiology so drastically? Tesla would say it's not magic, but current control. When the conductor is clean and aligned, energy flows without waste. Now think about how often you feel drained of energy, exhausted even after sleep, and unmotivated to act. What if this wasn't just a lack of rest, but a sign that your inner flow is blocked? The human body, like any electrical circuit, suffers when the flow of energy is interrupted. Repressed fears, unexpressed emotions, accumulated trauma, all of these act as residues that hinder the flow. That's why, when this energy begins to awaken, it brings up old feelings. It's not punishment, it's cleansing. The inner fire needs to consume impurities before shining with its full strength. But why does this awakening frighten so many people? Perhaps because it reveals truths we're not ready to face. It exposes weaknesses, showing the difference between what we appear to be and what we truly are. It demands courage. Tesla knew this. He himself experienced states of profound isolation, where he reported feeling currents coursing through his body, sometimes even causing physical pain. He understood that it wasn't just a mental issue, but an integral process, involving body, mind, and spirit. For him, humanity's true mistake was to have distanced itself from this inner knowledge, trying to replace it with external machines. A pattern break here. What if I told you that most of your limitations don't come from outside, but from this dormant field within you? What would happen if this energy were consciously and respectfully awakened? Would you still be the same? Or would you become something entirely new? This question is uncomfortable because it forces you to look within and admit that you may not know yourself as well as you think. History shows that this knowledge has always been present. In ancient Egypt, priests described rituals involving breathing and posture to guide ascending energy. In India, yogis created detailed maps of energy centers, describing how each one opens as the current rises. Among the Mayans and Aztecs, similar symbols represented the rising serpent, a metaphor for the same process. Tesla, even without relying on these traditions, reached the same conclusion from his observation of nature. Everything is current, everything is vibration, and the human body is no exception. It's interesting to note that this awakening isn't uniform. Some people report visions, others describe intense heat, and others feel a state of expanded consciousness where everything seems interconnected. What they all have in common is the realization that something within them has changed forever. Life is no longer the same because the inner realm is no longer the same. It's not a matter of believing or not, but of experiencing. Now, consider a little-known statistic. It's estimated that around 30% of people who practice meditation intensely have had some kind of ascending energy experience. Often they don't understand what's happening. Some are frightened, others shy away, but some persist and discover a power they never imagined. This shows that this isn't a rare phenomenon or restricted to a select few. It's available to any human being willing to look within. And here another inevitable question arises. Why don't they teach us this in schools? Why do we learn mathematical formulas and the names of rivers, but not how to manage the most powerful current within us? Perhaps because a human being who masters their own energy is less manipulable, less predictable, more free. Tesla understood this well. He believed that the future of humanity would depend not only on technological advances, but on the individual awakening of this force. Have you ever imagined what would happen if you started feeling this energy in your own body? It might be uncomfortable at first. Maybe memories you'd rather forget would surface. But along with this discomfort would come a newfound clarity, a sense of connection that no external technology can offer. It's at this point that life truly begins to change. Not because the world magically transforms, but because the way you perceive and react to it will never be the same again. Tesla argued that humanity's greatest tragedy was not ignorance of the laws of physics, but forgetfulness of its own vibrational nature. He said that deep down, we are like generators, but we live as if we were mere receivers. We are content to capture crumbs of energy when we have within us the capacity to generate enough light to illuminate entire cities. If only we knew how to activate that power. This is not just a metaphor, it's a call to action. The question that remains now is, are you willing to become a conductor of this current, or would you prefer to continue believing that you are condemned to live disconnected from yourself? Awakening this energy is not something distant or reserved for cloistered sages. It begins simply, in silence, in breathing, in paying attention to the body. Small steps that, when combined, build a bridge to a whole new state of consciousness. Perhaps this is Tesla's greatest legacy, not as an inventor, but as a visionary of the human condition. He reminded us that true technology is not outside, but within, and that the day we learn to awaken the dormant current, we will no longer need to search outside for what has always been here, waiting. Imagine for a moment that within you, there are two invisible rivers, running side by side, one from the left and the other from the right, intersecting in a spiral around the spine until they meet at energy points that shape your consciousness. These rivers carry not water, but information, memory, emotional states, intuitions, logic, and perceptions. Ancient traditions called them Ida and Pingala, subtle channels that govern, respectively, the lunar and solar sides of existence, intuition and reason, receptivity and action, feeling and thinking. Nikola Tesla, even without using these words, intuited that the human brain and nervous system functioned similarly, oscillating between opposite poles that needed balance to produce clarity. He believed that the human mind was like an electrical circuit. If only one side carries the current, the system overloads. If both work in harmony, a state of coherence arises capable of capturing invisible frequencies. Now think about how many times in your life you've felt divided. One side urged risk, the other screamed caution. One side wanted to follow intuition, the other insisted on logic and safety. These conflicts aren't merely psychological, they reflect a lack of synchronization between these internal channels. When you breathe unconsciously, you typically activate only one of these poles. But when you learn to breathe alternately, balancing both sides, something extraordinary happens. The cerebral hemispheres begin to work in sync, the mind expands, and suddenly what seemed chaotic becomes organized into a clearer design. Tesla knew that great ideas are not born from a single pole, but from the fusion of opposites. He himself said that instinct and logic were two sides of the same intelligence, and that his work was only possible because he knew how to unite these poles within himself. What if I told you there was a simple practice, done solely with breathing, capable of recreating this lost balance? It's called alternate breathing, or Nadi Shodhana, and it's one of the oldest and yet most relevant exercises in existence. Imagine sitting quietly, holding one nostril while inhaling through the other, then reversing the process. It almost seems trivial, but it's not. Recent scientific studies show that just a few minutes of practice reduces cortisol levels, the stress hormone, and increases cardiac coherence, the state in which the heart, breathing, and brain are aligned. Research published in Journal of Clinical Psychology in 2014, a study revealed that regular practitioners of this exercise experienced significant reductions in anxiety in just 6 weeks. Tesla, if he had access to these modern discoveries, would probably smile. For him, there was no difference between science and spirituality when the results were clear. Everything is vibration, everything is frequency, and any practice that restores balance to the human system must be understood as engineering the invisible. But why is it so difficult to balance these poles in everyday life? Because we've been trained to overvalue only one of them. The modern world pushes us toward the solar side: productivity, action, logic, constant analysis. At the same time, we disconnect from the lunar side: silence, intuition, perception of the invisible. This creates a partial life in which we always feel like something is missing. Have you ever felt that? Even when everything seems correct on paper, something doesn't fit inside, or that even guided by intuition, you ended up making decisions without structure. This happens because you've let one of the rivers dry up. Tesla understood this deeply. He lived in extremes, but he knew that his inventions only took shape when he managed to combine scientific discipline with an almost mystical sensibility. An everyday example helps visualize this. Imagine an executive who needs to make an important investment decision. Logic tells him the path is safe, the numbers seem solid, but something inside him hesitates. A silent intuition points to invisible risks. If he listens only to logic, he might move forward only to discover that there were hidden details that destroyed the plan. If he listens only to intuition, he might reject the opportunity and lose something valuable. But if he learns to unite both sides, he breathes calmly, balances his hemispheres, creates space for silence, and is able to see beyond the surface. He discovers connections that were previously hidden, finds an alternative path that unites security and vision. This ability is not a supernatural gift, it is the fruit of inner balance. Tesla did this constantly. He saw the invisible, but then organized every detail mathematically. So what happens when you live without this harmony? Your mind becomes a battlefield. Emotions and logic clash endlessly. Decisions drag on. Your body responds with stress, insomnia, and tension. Little by little, you feel like you've lost control of your own life. Now imagine the opposite. Each breath adjusting the poles, each inhalation cleansing one side, each exhalation balancing the other. Over time, you discover that you're no longer in internal conflict, but in flow. And when you're in flow, life responds differently. Tesla said that the universe is a vast field of opposing forces in harmony. Electricity only exists because there are poles. Light only manifests because current flows from one extreme to the other. If the entire cosmos works this way, why should it be any different for us? Perhaps human anguish isn't proof of failure, but merely of imbalance. What if the key isn't to fight these poles, but to accept and unite them as two halves that only make sense together? Now, for a pattern break. Have you ever noticed that you breathe differently depending on the time of day? Sometimes, upon waking, one nostril is more active than the other. This isn't a coincidence. It's part of the body's natural cycle, alternating energy flow to maintain balance. The problem is that the modern rhythm disrupts this process. We spend the entire day engaged in activities that require only one side, either uninterrupted rationality or unconscious escape into emotional distractions. The result is confusion and exhaustion. What would happen if you regained control of this cycle? Imagine practicing alternate breathing in the middle of a chaotic day. You close your eyes for 5 minutes, alternating your breath from one side to the other. When you're done, your body feels different. Your mind organizes itself. Your emotions stabilize. Nothing has changed externally, but inside, you feel different. It's not just a sensation, it's a measurement. A more stable heart rate, more balanced oxygenation, more coherent brainwaves. Science today confirms what Tesla already intuited. Balancing poles creates stability. What if this balance held the key not only to better decisions, but to accessing previously unknown levels of perception? Tesla believed that great inventions and insights emerged precisely in states where his mind was in complete coherence. It was as if an entire antenna were opening to capture information from a wider field. Perhaps the intuition we so often ignore is not a coincidence, but a channel that only opens when the two sides of the human being are in harmony. Humanity could be different if it learned this from an early age. Imagine schools teaching children to alternate breathing, to balance emotions and logic, to listen to intuition and science simultaneously. How many mistakes could be avoided? How many illnesses could be prevented? How many destinies could be transformed? And yet, we grow up without this knowledge, trying to resolve conflicts within ourselves that never needed to exist. Tesla saw beyond this. He believed that the human mind is capable of directly accessing the universal field, but only when it is silent and balanced. It's not about excluding the rational in favor of the spiritual, nor rejecting intuition in favor of logic. It's about uniting both at a point of coherence. In this state, the human being doesn't react to the world in a fragmented way, but creates an alignment with the whole. And here's a provocation. How many of your recent choices were born from a state of coherence? How many were born from conflict? What if you could, with a few minutes of conscious breathing, change the course of a decision that will affect years of your life? Would you make that effort? Tesla said, "Instinct is something that transcends knowledge." We undoubtedly have certain subtler fibers that allow us to perceive truths when logic is not enough. This phrase sums up the bridge between the two sides. Instinct does not eliminate reasoning, but surpasses it. However, it only works when the channel is clear and balanced. Life at its core is made up of this interplay of opposites, day and night, inhalation and exhalation, action and contemplation. Harmony lies not in choosing a side, but in learning to dance with both. Tesla saw this in the cosmos, but he also saw it within himself. Perhaps this is the simplest and, at the same time, most forgotten lesson. Balance within to create without. Now, the question remains, will you continue living divided, or will you have the courage to unite your poles and experience the clarity that arises from this encounter? Perhaps the next breathing cycle you take will be the first step toward a life of coherence. What if I told you that everything you've sought so far, clarity, peace, meaning, inner strength, is not outside, but has always been silently waiting within you? Nikola Tesla believed that the entire universe responds to the frequency we emit, and that the greatest human tragedy is not ignorance of the outside world, but forgetfulness of our own vibrational field. We've come this far by exploring silence, breathing, invisible sound, ascending energy, the balance of our inner poles. Now it's time to take the most important step, transforming knowledge into practice, ideas into action, inspiration into concrete experience. It's not enough to simply listen or understand. Transformation only happens when you act. How many times have you felt that a piece of content changed your perspective, but after a few days you return to your automatic routine without incorporating anything new? This happens because the mind loves to accumulate information, but fears the commitment of practice. Tesla was never content with merely intuiting or theorizing. He tested, experimented, and applied. That's why his legacy spans generations. And if you want to transform your life, you need to follow the same principle. Believing isn't enough. You must practice. You might be wondering where to begin. The path may seem vast, but the truth is that it all comes down to small, consistent practices that reprogram your inner self. The secret isn't in doing too much at once, but in creating consistency. Just as an electric current needs a continuous flow to generate light, your body and mind need repeated practices to generate clarity and transformation. Here's a strategic plan you can apply simply and directly. First, breathing with presence. Every morning before picking up your phone or getting lost in your routine, sit quietly and do 3 minutes of mindful breathing. Inhale for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4. Repeat. This small gesture creates a foundation of clarity that changes the tone of your entire day. Second, inner sound. Set aside 3 to 5 minutes at some point during the day to practice the bee's hum, the Brahmari. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and as you exhale, produce the soft, vibrant sound, letting the vibration run through your body. This helps dissolve tension and restore balance. Third, balance the poles. Once a day, practice alternate breathing. Inhale through one nostril, exhale through the other, and then reverse. Do this for 5 minutes. This simple exercise calms the mind, improves clarity, and helps you make decisions without the weight of emotional turmoil. Fourth, awaken your energy. Twice a week, sit with your spine erect, inhale deeply, contract your base slightly, and visualize energy rising up your spine, passing through centers of light to the top of your head. Don't force anything, just allow yourself to feel it. Over time, you will notice a new vitality in your life. Fifth, conscious silence. Before bed, turn off external stimuli and sit for a few minutes simply observing your natural breathing. If thoughts arise, don't fight them, just observe. This moment is like a vibrational bath, cleansing the noise accumulated during the day. Sixth, 21-day cycle. Practice this plan daily for 3 weeks. This is the average time to create a new pattern in your body and mind. At the end of this period, you will begin to notice real changes. Greater clarity, less anxiety, more intuition, more energy. You might think this isn't enough, 3 minutes here, 5 minutes there. But remember, it's not the size of the gesture that transforms. It's the repetition and presence. Tesla used to say that great forces move through small frequency adjustments. The same is true for you. Don't underestimate the power of seemingly simple practices. They are seeds that, cultivated, transform the entire landscape of your life. What if you fail one day? Forget to practice? Don't turn it into guilt. The path isn't perfection, it's persistence. Each time you return, you strengthen the current. Each time you choose to practice instead of getting lost in automaticity, you strengthen the field. Transformation isn't a straight line. It's a spiral movement, like the energy itself rising up the spine, sometimes slow, sometimes intense, but always upward. Now stop for a moment and reflect. What would your life be like if, instead of reacting to external chaos, you could respond from a stable center? What would your work, your relationships, your health be like if you were guided by clarity, calm, and intuition in every decision? We're not talking about an unattainable ideal, but a practice that's possible, accessible, within your breath. Each day, you have the choice to align with the noise or with harmony. Tesla believed that the future of humanity would be in the hands of those who learn to vibrate consciously. He saw the human body as a transmitter and receiver that, when adjusted, could capture universal truths. This vision is not utopia, it's an invitation for you to stop living as a mere spectator and become the creator of your own reality. The power is already within you. What's missing is the decision to use it. Therefore, my invitation is that you don't let this knowledge get lost in another vague memory. Turn it into practice. Choose to begin today. Take your first conscious breath now. Allow yourself to vibrate. Allow yourself to balance. Allow yourself to awaken. Life won't wait for you to be ready. It responds to what you emit now. And if this content touched something deep inside you, if it awakened a forgotten memory or a desire for change, don't keep it to yourself. Share your experience, even anonymously. Write in the comments what you felt, what you discovered, or any questions that arise. Each story is a spark that inspires another, and together we form a network of awareness that grows and strengthens. I also invite you to subscribe to the channel. This way, you won't miss the next steps on this journey, and together we can continue expanding this network of transformation. If this video resonated with you, please like it, because it helps us bring this message to more people who may need this silent call. And remember, every comment, every subscription, every gesture is part of this invisible chain we're building. You are not alone. You never have been. Breathe, practice, trust. The universe responds to your vibration, and your next breath could be the beginning of a whole new life.